A late-night house fire puts 3 roommates at the center of a gruesome crime.
There was so much smoke, they went to go put up the fire and tripped over the body.
It's grisly. Blood spatter all over, trail of blood.
They poured gasoline on him and set him on fire while he was still alive.
This was by far the most brutal murder case I ever worked on.
Shocked investigators sift through the evidence and uncover a mountain of lies.
I had to reopen a murder investigation.
You see the crime scene photos and the autopsy photos. That never goes away.
She told him something that lit him on fire.
The rage that was demonstrated, it was just beyond imagination.
April 7th, 2010. It's just past midnight when dispatchers in Stockton, California receive an urgent 911 call from local resident Drew Payette.
Mr. Payette said, "My house is on fire." Wasn't panicked, but it was urgent.
Drew gives police dispatchers the address, but he also explains to them that he's no longer at the house.
He told us he had come home, saw the fire. He immediately ran down to one of the local convenience stores and called the fire department from there.
Drew returns to the house while firefighters race to the scene. As soon as they arrive, first responders rush into the inferno and immediately notice something suspicious.
The front door was open. You could tell where the door jamb had been broken, like someone had kicked it in.
Firefighters battle to bring the blaze under control.
One of the things they do is they ventilate the roof so that the smoke and the heat can dissipate.
While working on the ceiling, they make a gruesome discovery.
There was so much smoke and no visibility that they literally tripped over a body.
The body appears to be male, and he is clearly deceased.
There was no saving him. So as soon as the fire department's responsibilities were done, they called in law enforcement.
Responding officers questioned Drew Payette to find out who the victim might be.
We find out who was living with Drew, which was Valerie Nessler and Jeff Wheely. So our concern was to find both of them. When we got a description of Jeff, we all suspected that that was Mr. Wheely in the house.
Jeff Wheatley was born in 1961 in San Jose, California, less than 100 miles away from Stockton.
We had 2 other sisters. He was the only boy, and I think a lot was expected of him, and he had to put up with a lot of female energy. We were all really strong, opinionated women.
With such strong influence from his sisters, Jeff had no trouble relating to the opposite sex.
He was just funny. He's always smiling and always cute. And so he had women after him his whole life. He was a rascal, didn't graduate from high school. He was a bit of a wild child.
He needed a little bit of discipline in his life, so he decided to go into the Coast Guard.
While in the Coast Guard, Jeff began the first of a string of failed marriages.
I got to the point where I would say, you know, Jeff, you don't have to marry them. But he wanted that so bad. He wanted family. And they never lasted very long. He'd get married because he'd fall in love with their children, because that's how bad he wanted a family.
Jeff crisscrossed the country for decades, bouncing from girl to girl and career to career.
After the Coast Guard, he tried a few different things. He owned a restaurant.
He was a truck driver. He also went to nursing school, but none ended up working out.
Jeff was someone who tried a lot of different things in his life, gone a lot of different directions.
Gosh, he lived everywhere. Alaska, and then he was in Astoria, Oregon, and then I believe he went to Georgia, and he came back to the Bay Area. He was in San Jose again, and then to Lodi.
In 2010, another failed relationship brought Jeff to Stockton.
He had broken up with a girlfriend that he was living with in Lodi, and he needed a place to live. And an acquaintance of his, Drew, offered him a room to rent in his house.
Drew's mother had let him stay there, and then Drew had brought some friends in to live with him.
Jeff was only living there a couple of weeks when Valerie moved in.
Unlike Jeff, 25-year-old Valerie Nessler only knew the tough streets of Stockton.
The part where Val grew up was East Stockton, and that's a pretty rough area.
Valerie and a lot of her friends, they lived in a trailer park right around the corner from the school over there.
When you live and grow up in Stockton, especially where she lived, you have to be scrappy and you have to be able to stand up for yourself. And she was really good at that. But the thing that I remember most about Val growing up is her smile.
Valerie's tough yet tender father was her role model.
I always thought of Valerie as a daddy's girl. Just the way that she would look at her dad. He had a really big heart. Valerie really took on that persona like her dad.
She was kind of an anomaly. She stuck out a little bit as a more tender-hearted kid who she was trying to find her way through.
Valerie loved making people feel good, making people feel better about themselves, being there for people.
In 2005, 20-year-old Valerie was blindsided by tragedy. In one unimaginably dark moment, her father took his own life.
He shot himself. It was a shock, of course. It didn't make sense. Her dad held everything together, and so that devastated Valerie.
I went to the service for her father, and it was an emotional time.
Less than a year after her dad's death, Valerie learned that she was pregnant. When she and the baby's father broke up, Valerie was left to raise the child on her own. But Valerie's loneliness and grief vanished the first time she held baby Chloe in her arms.
She had Chloe, and she kind of felt like for a minute she forgot about her dad and her heart was full.
But just 2 months after the birth of baby Chloe, fate dealt Valerie yet another dreadful blow.
Valerie went to go check on Chloe in the bedroom. She said she wasn't breathing, and she tried to do CPR and get her to breathe, but she had already passed.
Her child had died of SIDS.
She was broken. There was no Valerie left. She just wasn't the same at all. It devastated her after, losing her father and then her baby. It broke her. You couldn't be more broken.
Valerie soon found her own way of numbing the pain.
After losing Chloe, she got into drugs really heavily, and that was it.
From the depths of despair, Valerie continued to seek guidance from those around her.
I got in touch and went to lunch, and we talked about the struggles of losing a child and how to move forward and how to get through it.
With help from friends and family, Valerie did her best to move forward. And by February 2010, she was looking for a fresh start.
She started working at San Joaquin County. She was working for WorkNet. She was doing clerical work.
That's when Drew Payette rented Valerie a room in his home, just down the hall from Jeff Wheatley. The 3 roommates forged a fast friendship.
They were all 3 living in the same house, and everything seemed to be going well. They were sharing the bills, and it looked like a pretty good living situation.
But by April 7th, only 2 months after Valerie moved in, their home is host to homicide detectives in the aftermath of a deadly fire.
I was assigned to the homicide unit, and it was my week to be on call, so I got called out to go view the scene.
Even for seasoned homicide detectives, the scene is especially horrific.
The fire had put off a lot of heat, but not a lot of fire. There was just a lot of smoke damage throughout the house. If you walked into the living room, to my left was the body. His head was facing away from the door. To the right, there was a blood trail against the walls, as if someone with a rag had smeared blood on the walls.
It's grisly. Blood spatter all over, trail of blood.
We started analyzing the small details of the crime scene. It was horrific, and I want to find who did this. I want to find who did this and held them responsible.
Coming up, the crime scene yields a trove of ominous clues.
A sawed-off shotgun that had 2 shells that were discharged, and there were 2 kitchen knives that had blood on them.
And an autopsy reveals horrific details about the manner of death.
This was a case where someone had been burned alive.
Detectives in Stockton, California, are sifting through the ashes of a gruesome homicide.
The fire department was called to the house, and it was firefighters who found
That Jeff Wheatley was one of his roommates, so that's how we suspected that was Jeff. He was shot with a shotgun in his face and his shoulder. You could see the shotgun pellets that would hit the wall and the cabinet. So clearly there was a shotgun blast in the kitchen. There was a struggle.
They found a gas can. There was accelerant evidence all over the place. Clothes, wall, floor. It was inescapable.
You could clearly see that he was stabbed. I didn't know how many times. He was murdered in a very horrific way. There is just no doubt in anybody's mind that this wasn't somebody who was personally enraged who had to commit that.
A blood trail leads police to other rooms and more clues.
There was blood like someone was cleaning up in the bathroom.
Police were wondering if it was blood from the victim or if it was blood from the perpetrator.
We thought whoever we were going to catch could have a cut on their hands, and we were going to have a DNA profile on that blood.
A pair of gloves was found, and those gloves had blood on them.
Then, police make another startling discovery.
Towards the kitchen, there was a garbage bag that was just sitting there, very out of place.
The bag's contents give detectives their first clues about the killer.
In the bag was absolutely a treasure trove of evidence. It had a shotgun in there, a sawed-off shotgun. The gun had 2 shells that were discharged, and there were 2 kitchen knives. Both of them had blood on them.
Also, a bag of clothing was left in the house. Whoever committed the crime decided not to take it with them.
It had men's clothes in there and boots that had blood on them, like someone was using these boots to kick somebody and now they were changing their clothes. I think they're planning on taking it all, but I think they panicked and just left it all there.
Crime scene techs swab and tag the forensic evidence and turn the body over to the medical examiner. But veteran police know that for the time being, they're on their own.
DNA takes months, so there's the processing the house that we were doing everything from the accelerants to DNA to processing for fingerprints and all the forensic evidence that gets done.
With crime scene investigators continuing to gather evidence at the house, the medical examiner attempts to confirm the victim's identity.
He called wanting me to identify Jeff's tattoos. I told him about Jeff's tattoos. He called me back and said, yes, it's him. I'm just trying to put my reaction into an emotion. I was heartbroken.
The autopsy details the utter brutality of the crime.
He had stab wounds, 32 of them, all over his body. Some were very pronounced, very deep in the thorax. He was stabbed in the eye, across the bridge of the nose. But there were about 12 stab wounds in the side of his head that were very shallow and very close together, as if somebody was taking a knife and just repeatedly stabbing.
One particular post-mortem detail shocks even seasoned investigators.
My forensic pathologist had tested the carbon monoxide levels of Jeff Wheatley's blood, and it was elevated. And he had microparticles of soot in his esophagus down in his deep lung tissue. So we had solid forensic evidence that Jeff Wheatley was alive as he was being burned. The shotgun blast would have killed him. The stab wounds alone would have killed him. But being burned alive killed him. You just looked at, quite frankly, the carnage that whoever did this exacted on Jeff Wheatley. And there was no doubt that this was personal. So obviously we're going to start looking for people who have got a motive to be enraged with Jeff.
Who could possibly want Jeff to die so horrifically, and why? With still no sign of the third roommate, Valerie Nessler, detectives begin to worry.
Where's Valerie? She's one of the roommates. She's living at this house. And where is she? Is she dead? Is she been hurt?
Detectives turn to live-in landlord Drew Payette for answers.
The first thing we want to do is interview the occupants of the house. Drew's statement was, I left the house. Came back a couple hours later, the house was on fire. He said, I went back to the convenience store and called the fire department.
Detectives then ask Drew about his activities prior to leaving the house, and they are stunned by his response.
One of the things that Drew Payette had told us was that he had got a call from Valerie to get out of the house. So we assume that Valerie knew something about this case.
Though Drew has dropped a potential bombshell on the investigation, police remain cautious of trusting him completely.
You start casting a little bit of suspicion on him, and who's he protecting? Is he protecting himself? So we were always a little skeptical of Drew, but we wanted to talk to Valerie.
While officers scour the city for Valerie, detectives develop theories based on the location of the crime.
Every good neighborhood in Stockton has a bad neighborhood a few blocks away. And where the house was is just a few blocks away from a street which has historically been associated with a certain amount of violent crime.
There seems to be a lot of gang activity in town and a lot of drug trade.
The location of the city on both the I-5 and 99 freeways, I think, is a contributor because that plays a role in drug trafficking.
Could Jeff be involved in the neighborhood's shady underbelly? A search of police records reveals minor drug busts in Jeff's past.
He had had a medical condition, and because of that medical condition, got involved in illegal drugs.
While he was in the Coast Guard, he had a bad fall and hurt his knee pretty bad, and he had his first knee surgery. And then he had another fall, re-injured his knee. He became addicted to pain pills. Then the VA took him off of pain pills, and he resorted to street drugs. He tried really hard a few times, and there were times where he was clean, but he always fell back. That affected his life in every single way. Financially, ties with the family. He got arrested a couple of times.
Could Jeff's small-time drug use have really led to such a violent death? Detectives hope the answer lies with Jeff's missing roommate, Valerie Nessler.
Finding Valerie was primary. We needed to talk to her, find out what her side of the story was.
Coming up, detectives track down Valerie.
We confronted her with, wait a second, you warned Drew to get out of the house.
And details of an alleged kidnapping begin to emerge.
They weren't going to let somebody who was a witness.
In April 2010, investigators in Stockton, California are looking into the brutal murder of 48-year-old Jeff Wheatley. The most immediate concern is locating Jeff's missing roommate, Valerie Nessler.
Forensics was off. It was all sent out for the crime lab. So our concern was to find her and confirm she's okay, and two, take a statement from her.
Late on the evening of April 7th, supposedly made to her live-in landlord, Drew.
We confronted her with, wait a second, you warned Drew to get out of the house.
That's when Valerie changes her tune.
She said, I was in the house, two guys come barging through the door, kick down the door, and I run. I was so scared, I ran.
The question for detectives is, why would someone be targeting Jeff?
Clearly, whoever did this to Jeff came with extreme prejudice. They weren't going to let somebody who was a witness live. They were prepared to kill Jeff. So we sat there going, there's got to be something more. We thought she wasn't giving us the full story.
Pressed for descriptions of the assailants, Valerie admits she did recognize one of the men as someone who runs in her same circle.
She mentioned the name AJ, and then we put together AJ Perryman.
Detectives hope finding AJ will shed some light on what Valerie has told them.
They were all suspicious of Valerie's story from the beginning, but they had nothing to hold her on, so they had to let her go.
Detectives immediately issue an APB for AJ Perryman, and it's not long before patrol officers are leading him into the station. Before they begin the interview, detectives run a quick check on AJ's car.
Detective George ran the license plate, and sure enough, Officer Sariram of the Lodi Police Department had stopped the car that night while the fire was going on. He didn't write a report because all he'd found was a meth pipe.
Investigators start their interview with AJ by questioning him about the traffic stop the night of the murder.
AJ Perryman said, "I picked up these guys. I didn't know what had happened."
But since Valerie has already pointed the finger at AJ, police believe he knows more than he's letting on.
So we process his car, and all the carpets are gone, and the car's been bleached out. I mean, it's been washed clean. Inside, why are you cleaning your car out unless you knew what had just happened or what that car was involved with or the people in your car? So to me, that was significant to pin part of the culpability on AJ Perryman. We had arrested him, and that interview ended like that. But we still got to develop the physical evidence.
Detectives then turn to Officer Nick Sariram to get more information about AJ Perryman's traffic stop the night of the murder.
I was on patrol, just a normal night, and I noticed a car that seemed to be trying to get away from me. From there, I just got behind the vehicle. It made a quick U-turn, pulled onto a side street in a residential area, and the front seat passenger ended up running from the vehicle.
Experience dictated Sariram's next move.
I know it's important to stick with the car, make sure there's no threats in the car, and then just try and gather as much intelligence as to who ran and why.
Officer Sariram tells detectives that when he spoke to the driver, AJ, there was another passenger in the vehicle.
Sitting there in the rear passenger seat was Valerie Nessler. She said she just fled and hunkered down and hid somewhere. Well, now we've had definitive proof that she's lying about that.
Sariram ordered Valerie and AJ to identify the man who ran.
He said, what was the name of the guy that fled? And I forget the name she gave him, but she gave him a fake name.
When his vehicle search turned up drug paraphernalia, Sariram's experience led him to one conclusion.
My presumption was that the passenger who ran had a warrant. I didn't think it was anything major.
News of this traffic stop cements Valerie Nessler as a key suspect.
We knew she had lied to us on the April 7th interview. So she was lying before, she's lying now. What else is she lying about?
Investigators turn up the heat on Valerie.
She was brought in for further questioning. Just, your typical, hey, we need to clarify additional information.
Valerie admits there is more to the story. She tells detectives that after AJ and the other man killed Jeff, they kidnapped her.
She was now changing her story in that not only they come in and busted the door and she fled, she says, no, they busted in the door and now they took me with them. And I fled in the car with them.
She also reveals the real name of the second male attacker, the man Officer Sariram watched sprint from AJ's car during the traffic stop.
She gave up in that interview a guy named Robert Turner.
Like Valerie, Robert Turner was a child of tragedy.
Robert has 2 brothers and a sister. He is the baby of the family. His father died when he was 5 years old, and I know that impacted him.
Robert's older brother, Moose, did his best to fill in for their absent dad, until, in 1994, Moose died from a gunshot wound.
Robert was like 16 years old, and it was very sudden and tragic.
Everything looked like it was an accidental discharge.
It affected my Uncle Robert a lot because he had already lost his father. So now the oldest man of the family is gone now too. He stayed with me. Then he was working like 2 jobs. He was doing really well. And then I believe he got laid off of 1 job, and then he pretty much gave up. He started hanging out with that crowd and started doing drugs.
Valerie, AJ, and Jeff all ran in the same circles because they all partied together and they saw each other a lot.
Now, Valerie Nessler is implicating Robert in a heinous crime.
Valerie told detectives that Robert was one of the men who had killed Jeff Wheatley.
A record search confirms that at least part of Valerie's new story could be true. A 33-year-old Robert Turner in their database fits her description to the letter.
We put out warrants for Robert, and we had people looking for Robert Turner everywhere.
A bolo for Robert Turner goes out to all surrounding counties.
I was at home with my kids, and I received a phone call to turn the TV on because my Uncle Robert was on the news. He was wanted for murder of a man in Stockton.
Coming up, a cornered fugitive makes a cry for help.
I could hear like a desperation in his voice. He sounded almost hysterical, upset, remorseful, lost.
And a motive emerges.
They could have believed he had been responsible for the death of Robert Turner.
Detectives in Stockton, California are getting to the bottom of the brutal slaying of 48-year-old Jeff Wheatley. Jeff's roommate, Valerie Nessler, told police that AJ Perryman and Robert Turner killed Jeff and kidnapped her. But in the eyes of detectives, Valerie is walking a tightrope between witness and suspect.
The detectives, Detective George and Villanueva, they're like, she's good for this. Let's arrest her. And I'm like, well, we don't have enough yet.
Meanwhile, the hunt is on for 33-year-old Robert Turner.
We had Shasta County Sheriff's deputies looking for him up there, driving past his old places of residence. We had people driving past and the marshals looking for him down in Stockton.
I just watched the news as much as I could to find out what had been going on.
And turned himself in.
In custody, Turner confesses that a phone call to his family gave him the courage to surrender.
My Uncle Robert called me and was crying. I could hear desperation in his voice. He sounded almost hysterical, upset, remorseful, lost. I told him to turn himself in.
But his family's help is the only thing Robert will admit.
He had invoked his right to remain silent and didn't say anything.
To investigators' relief, Robert didn't have to speak in order to demonstrate his guilt.
We were looking for somebody who had a cut on his hand, and Robert Turner turns himself in. He's got that cut across his finger that was very deep and consistent with thrusting a knife down, hitting a hard object like a bone, and then having your hand slide down. Before we even had the DNA back, I knew we had our guy.
Police are convinced that both Robert Turner and Valerie Nessler are directly involved in Jeff Wheatley's murder. But until conclusive DNA evidence comes back from lab analysis, they can only hold Turner.
In about 2 months, we had what we believed to be the balance of the forensic evidence.
Finally, in mid-June, blood swabs taken from the murder weapons confirm what investigators believe about the wound on Turner's hand.
The knife had Robert Turner's blood on it. from being cut during that stabbing process. That's unassailable forensic evidence, so I felt very confident in our theory of the case.
Another big break in the case comes with the lab results from the latex glove found in Valerie's bedroom.
DNA analysis would show that not only did the glove have Miss Nessler's DNA on it, but the blood on it was Jeff Wheatley's. We're pretty excited. We are vindicated in that we're going to go forward and we're going to hold these people responsible.
As for Valerie and Jeff's other roommate, Drew Payette, the evidence is conclusive.
Drew's story checked out, and clearly as we were developing the forensics, nothing pointed towards Drew.
With Drew Payette cleared, Stockton detectives bring Valerie in on June 23rd for what they hope will be her final interview.
We already had a game plan that we were going to press her and we were going to confront her with the forensic evidence.
After going over her story once again, investigators spring their trap.
The detective slid a picture over to Valerie of Jeff in the house, how we found his body. She started screaming and crying and wailing. And then, like a fountain, she just turned it off. It was the most fake scream and cry I'd ever heard. And I knew she was crumbling. From there, she said she had participated in it and she had stabbed him.
But Valerie's confession comes with a caveat.
She said, I only stabbed him a couple times, and she completely tried to play up that I was fearful of Robert Turner and AJ Perryman, and if I didn't go along and do what they said, that they'd hurt me. She clearly is trying to put all culpability on Robert Turner and AJ Perryman.
Just what was Valerie's role in the killing? And why did Jeff have to die in such a gruesome and painful way? According to Valerie, the answer lies in her friend Robert Turner's tragic past.
Valerie Nessler and Robert Turner had developed a theory that Mr. Wheatley had been responsible for the death of Robert Turner's brother some many years before.
According to Valerie, Jeff told her he'd killed a man the same year that Robert's brother Moose died.
There might have been some allegations that the victim at one point had been bragging to Valerie about a killing that he was involved in 1994. And Valerie ended up telling Mr. Turner that the victim had said that. Mr. Turner then theorized that the victim killed his brother. And at that point, came up with a plot to kill him.
Robert knew he and Valerie couldn't carry out their plan alone and reached out to AJ Perryman for help.
Mr. Perryman appeared to have some loyalty to Mr. Turner and was at least protective.
By the time the interrogation ends, Valerie is in handcuffs.
She's immediately arrested and booked for the murder of Jeff Wheatley.
Coming up, prosecutors fight to disprove one killing in order to get justice for another.
I had to reopen a murder investigation.
And a gruesome play-by-play in court leaves a jury stunned.
The DA brought out a knife that was bent completely around.
They poured gas on him as part of that torture process.
Detectives in Stockton, California have 3 suspects in custody in the brutal murder of 48-year-old Jeff Wheatley. But in order to convict them, prosecutors need to be confident of the motive.
My Uncle Robert did believe that the victim was involved with the death of my Uncle Moose.
Prosecutor Mark Ott now has 2 investigations rolled into one: Jeff Wheatley's murder and the 1994 death of Robert Turner's beloved brother, Moose.
I had to reopen a murder investigation. I had to bring all the forensics back, bring all the detectives. I wanted to prove that Jeff Wheatley had nothing to do with that killing.
Investigators quickly discover that Jeff Wheatley wasn't even in the same state as Moose at the time of his death.
According to Wendy, his sister, he was in the Merchant Marine in Atlanta, Georgia, so clearly could have never been part of that.
By June 2011, San Joaquin County prosecutors have secured murder indictments against.
I had to do Alan Perryman's trial after I did Valerie and Robert's together.
Prosecutors carefully walk the spellbound jurors through exactly what happened on the night of Jeff Wheatley's murder.
The DA brought out a sawed-off shotgun. He brought out a knife that was bent completely around and brought out a gas can.
All three of the defendants kick in the door. They immediately go to the right, and Jeff is in the kitchen. I believe Robert Turner immediately fires 2 rounds from a sawed-off shotgun. It hit him pretty solid. It knocked him down. It didn't kill him right away. So they needed to do something about that. There was a kitchen drawer where all the steak knives were kept. They got those knives and proceeded to stab Jeff. Robert Turner took the kitchen knives and tortured him to try to get him to confess to killing his brother 10 years earlier. Then they poured gas on him as part of that torture process.
Jeff survived the torture, but there would be no way to survive what happened next.
They flipped the match on him, and he goes up in a fireball.
Prosecutors present proof that Robert Turner's twisted attempt at justice was directed at the wrong man. They allege Valerie got the ball rolling when she convinced Robert that Jeff killed his brother Moose.
She had spun up Robert Turner about Jeff Wheatley killing Moose to be part of a drama.
There was a kind of folie à deux between the two of them that just spun and spun and spun and magnified and resulted in this terrible crime.
Valerie takes the stand and points the finger elsewhere.
Valerie Nessler's defense was that she was under duress. The defense attorneys, they want to do everything they can to focus on Robert Turner and not focus on her.
She said that she was forced into it, that if she didn't participate in the stabbing, that they were going to hurt her.
Then, in the middle of the trial, a jailer intercepts a note within the courthouse holding cells.
It was a note from Robert Turner to Valerie Nessler that said, if you put $10,000 on my books, I'll get on the stand and say I did it all. You had nothing to do with it.
They read it in court, and he told her she was like a sister to him and he would take the fall. Well, if she was innocent, there's no need for him to say, I'll take the fall.
Valorie's already weak defense crumbles.
You're saying you're afraid of this guy? You're saying that he's the evil one, that you're not working with him? You're still working with him. And so I use that incredibly powerful evidence against Valerie Nessler that she wasn't afraid of him, that this wasn't a duress type situation.
On July 20th, Robert's jury announces their verdict.
Robert Turner was convicted of first-degree murder, but I had special circumstances alleged that were found true, which gives him life without the possibility of parole. So Robert Turner will never get a parole date.
A few days later, Valerie is also found guilty and sentenced to 26 years in jail. The possibility that Valerie may someday see life outside of prison sours the victory for Jeff's family.
She got less than she deserved. She should have gotten the same sentence as Robert Turner.
This was by far the most brutal murder case that I ever worked on. They're all brutal, they're all terrible. A loved one is no longer with us, but the rage that was demonstrated, it was just beyond imagination. It was so terrible.
It's hard to mourn and be angry at the same time. Now I think of Jeff with happy memories, but I think of that trial and I have a lot of anger at them. How stupid and unnecessary and ridiculous.
It was supposed to be a casual lunch with friends on a beautiful June afternoon in Florida. Madison Sheets, just 17 years old, was looking forward to good food and company at a popular restaurant in Ponte Vedra Beach. But as she and her mother prepared to leave, Madison noticed someone she never wanted to see again, her ex-boyfriend sitting nearby watching. What happened next would change her life forever, leaving her fighting not just for survival, but for the ability to ever walk again. This is the story of Madison Schmidt, a story of terror, heroism, and a recovery that doctors called nothing short of miraculous. She attended Ponte Vedra High School, where she was known as a friendly, outgoing student with a bright future ahead. Like many teenagers, Madison experienced the ups and downs of first relationships. In late 2022, Madison began dating Spencer Pearson. For approximately 6 months, the two spent time together, as many teenage couples do. To outside observers, they seemed like any other young couple navigating high school romance. But by April 2023, Madison had made a decision. The relationship wasn't healthy. Something wasn't right. At just 17 years old, she did what many people twice her age struggle to do. She ended the relationship and walked away. What Madison could not have known was that her decision would trigger a descent into obsession and violence that would nearly cost her everything. Spencer Pearson did not accept the breakup. For the next 2 months, from April through early June, Pearson engaged in a relentless campaign of stalking and harassment. He bombarded Madison with messages on social media. He showed up at places where he knew she would be. He made it clear through his actions that he had no intention of letting Madison move on with her life. The harassment escalated to the point where Madison and her family became genuinely concerned for her safety. This was not just a broken-hearted teenager. This was someone whose behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and threatening. Madison confided in friends about her fears. Her mother, Jacqueline Royer, was aware of the situation and deeply worried. In late April, Pearson's mental state deteriorated further. He posted a disturbing photo on Snapchat, showing a necktie around his neck, with tears streaming down his face, seemingly simulating suicide. The post alarmed everyone who saw it. It was a cry for help, a manipulation tactic, or perhaps both, a warning sign that Pearson was spiraling into a dangerous psychological state. Pearson's family recognized their son was in crisis. They took him for evaluation and treatment. He was hospitalized for 5 days in April, receiving psychiatric care for what his family described as severe depression, social anxiety, and autism. His parents watched helplessly as their son struggled with emotional turmoil they could not control, but hospitalization did not resolve the underlying issues. When Pearson was released, the obsession with Madison remained. If anything, it had intensified. He continued to follow her movements and make his presence known in increasingly unsettling ways. Madison tried to go about her normal life. She spent time with friends, went to school, looked forward to her senior year. But there was always an undercurrent of unease, a nagging worry about what her ex-boyfriend might do next. That worry would prove tragically well-founded. On the afternoon of June 3, 2023, Madison made plans to meet her mother and friends for lunch at Mr. Chubby's Wings, a casual restaurant in Ponte Vedra Beach. It was meant to be an enjoyable afternoon. Nothing special, just quality time with people she cared about. Madison and Jacqueline arrived and settled in with their group. The conversation flowed easily. The food was good, and for a while it seemed perfectly ordinary. Madison felt relaxed and happy in a crowded public place. But approximately 30 minutes into their meal, everything changed. Madison's eyes fell on a figure across the restaurant, and her heart sank. Spencer Pearson was there, sitting at a table watching her. His presence was no coincidence. Surveillance cameras inside the restaurant captured what happened next. The recording showed Pearson walking near Madison's table as soon as he entered, making his presence unmistakably known. Madison's reaction was visible even on grainy images. She appeared shocked and frightened. Madison and Jacqueline exchanged worried glances. They had discussed this scenario before. What to do if Pearson showed up? The answer was simple. Leave immediately. Do not engage. Get to safety. Madison's friend Casey Estep, who was with them, later described how Madison and her mother suddenly said they had to go right away. There was no mistaking the urgency in their voices or the fear in their eyes. They asked for the check quickly, trying not to draw attention to their hasty departure. Madison's pulse raced as she gathered her things. The goal was to leave quietly and avoid confrontation. They would get to the parking lot, get in the car, and drive away. It was a reasonable plan. It should have worked. But as surveillance recordings later revealed, Pearson watched from his position near a window, tracking their movements. The moment Madison and Jacqueline stepped outside into the bright Florida sunshine, Pearson bolted from his seat and ran after them. What happened in that parking lot was an explosion of violence so sudden and brutal that witnesses struggled to process what they were seeing. Pearson came at Madison from behind with a large folding knife that had been given to him by his parents. It was even engraved with his personal information. He forced Madison to the ground and began stabbing her with terrifying ferocity. The attack was relentless, methodical, meant to kill. Pearson stabbed Madison 17 times, targeting her neck, back, and torso. Each thrust of the blade was an attempt to end her life. Madison screamed. Witnesses froze in horror. And Jacqueline Royer, faced with every parent's worst nightmare, did what any mother would do. She threw herself into the fray to save her daughter's life. Jacqueline lunged at Pearson, trying to pull him off Madison. She grabbed at him, struck at him, used her own body to shield her daughter. Pearson turned the knife on her, stabbing Jacqueline in the forehead, hand, and leg. Blood poured from her wounds, but she did not stop fighting. She continued to grapple with Pearson, desperately trying to give Madison a chance to survive. The attack might have continued until both women were dead, if not for Kennedy Armstrong, a 22-year-old restaurant manager who had just pulled into the parking lot. Armstrong heard the screams and did not hesitate. He sprinted 160 feet across the parking lot and tackled Pearson to the ground with full force. The impact separated Pearson from his victims, but the danger was not over. Pearson tried to get back up, still holding the knife. Armstrong jumped on him again, pinning Pearson's arms down to prevent him from continuing the attack. For crucial seconds, Armstrong held Pearson down. As Armstrong briefly glanced toward the victims to assess their condition, Pearson made one final horrifying move. He began slitting his own throat with the knife. Bystanders rushed forward and wrestled the knife away before he could inflict fatal injuries on himself. The parking lot had become a scene of carnage. Madison lay bleeding from 17 stab wounds, her life hanging by a thread. Jacqueline was injured but conscious. her maternal instinct having overridden self-preservation. Armstrong nursed an injured hand where Pearson had cut him, nerve damage that would require multiple surgeries, and Pearson lay on the ground with self-inflicted throat wounds, surrounded by the destruction his obsession had wrought. Emergency services arrived within minutes. Paramedics immediately went to work on Madison, whose injuries were catastrophic. She had been stabbed in the back, and the blade had penetrated her spinal cord. As medical personnel rushed to stabilize her for transport, the terrible reality set in. Even if Madison survived, her life would never be the same. Madison Sheets was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The 17 stab wounds had caused massive trauma, but it was the spinal cord injury that represented the most devastating consequence. The doctors delivered news that crushed Madison's family. She was paralyzed from the chest down. The blade had severed the neural pathways that allowed her brain to communicate with the lower half of her body. For a teenage girl who had been active and independent just hours before, the diagnosis was incomprehensible. Madison would never walk again. She would never run, never dance, never experience the simple joy of moving through the world on her own 2 feet. Her senior year of high school, which should have been filled with proms and college applications, would instead be consumed by hospitals, rehabilitation, and learning to navigate a world suddenly made inaccessible. The physical injuries were severe enough. Madison underwent emergency surgery and began the painful process of healing from multiple knife wounds. But the psychological trauma ran even deeper. She had been betrayed by someone she once trusted, hunted down in a public parking lot, and subjected to attempted murder in broad daylight. The sense of safety that most people take for granted had been violently ripped away. Jacqueline Royer recovered from her physical injuries, the stab wounds to her forehead, hand, and leg, but the emotional scars would last much longer. She had fought to protect her daughter, yet she had not been able to prevent the catastrophic spinal injury. The guilt and trauma of that day would haunt her. Kennedy Armstrong also faced a long recovery. The nerve damage to his hand required multiple surgeries and extensive rehabilitation. His quick thinking and bravery had undoubtedly saved Madison's life. Had he not tackled Pearson when he did, the attack would have continued until Madison was dead. Yet Armstrong bore both physical and emotional scars from those terrifying minutes. As news of the attack spread, the community rallied around the Chemetz family. A GoFundMe campaign was established to help with mounting medical expenses. Friends organized vigils. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, but it could not change the fundamental reality. Madison's life had been forever altered by senseless violence. Spencer Pearson survived his self-inflicted wounds and was arrested. He was charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated battery causing serious bodily injury. The evidence was overwhelming: surveillance recordings, eyewitness testimony, and the knife itself. But for the Chemetz family, the criminal charges were secondary to the daily struggle of rebuilding their lives. Madison faced months of intensive physical therapy, learning to use a wheelchair, adapting to a body that no longer responded as it once had. Every day brought new challenges, new frustrations, new moments of grief for the life she had lost. Doctors told Madison what she already knew but could not accept. The paralysis was permanent. There was no surgery that could repair a severed spinal cord. She would be in a wheelchair for the rest of her life, dependent on others for basic tasks, forever marked by the violence Pearson had inflicted. Madison had every reason to give up, to sink into despair, to rage against the unfairness. No one would have blamed her for surrendering to darkness. But Madison Chemetz was made of stronger stuff than anyone realized, perhaps even stronger than she realized herself. What happened over the next 11 months defied medical expectations and inspired everyone who witnessed it. Madison Shemetz, the teenage girl who had been told she would never walk again, decided that was not good enough. She would prove the doctors wrong. She would stand up. She would walk. And she would do it before graduation. The rehabilitation process was grueling beyond imagination. Every day, Madison's worked with physical therapists, pushing her body to absolute limits and beyond. The pain was excruciating. The progress was maddeningly slow, measured in millimeters. There were setbacks and plateaus, moments when further recovery seemed impossible. But Madison refused to quit. She drew strength from her mother, who had literally put her own body between Madison and a knife-wielding attacker. She drew inspiration from Kennedy Armstrong, who had risked his life for a stranger without hesitation. And she drew determination from somewhere deep within herself, a well of resilience she did not know existed. Slowly, impossibly, Madison began to regain function. It started with tiny movements, a toe wiggle, a slight muscle contraction. Physical therapists worked with her for hours each day, stimulating muscles, encouraging neural pathways to find new routes around damaged areas. Medical professionals watched her progress with amazement. This was not supposed to happen. Severed spinal cords do not heal. Paralyzed teenagers do not walk again. But Madison was rewriting the rules. Month by month, her strength returned. First, she could move her legs slightly. Then she could stand with assistance. Then she could take a step, then two, then more. The wheelchair that had seemed permanent became something she used less frequently. Physical therapy sessions that had once left her exhausted began yielding visible, measurable results. Her doctors called it remarkable. Her physical therapists called it extraordinary. Her family called it a miracle. Madison called it the hardest thing she had ever done and the most important. On her graduation day in May 2024, just under a year after the attack that left her paralyzed, Madison Sheets walked across the stage to receive her diploma from Ponte Vedra High School. She walked on her own 2 feet without assistance, her head held high and her smile radiant. The auditorium erupted in applause. Students, teachers, and parents who knew her story rose in a standing ovation that seemed endless. Many had tears streaming down their faces, overwhelmed by witnessing such a profound demonstration of human determination. Madison's walk across that stage was more than personal triumph. It was a statement. It was proof that violence does not have to have the final word. It was evidence that the human spirit can overcome even the most devastating trauma. It was hope embodied in the determined steps of a teenage girl who refused to let her attacker define her life. While Madison worked on her recovery, the criminal case moved forward. In July 2024, more than a year after the attack, Pearson changed his plea from not guilty to guilty on all charges. The sentencing hearing in November 2024 was packed with family, friends, supporters, and media. The case had drawn significant national attention as people followed Madison's remarkable recovery. Pearson's defense attorneys argued for leniency, pointing to their client's mental health struggles, his youth, his lack of prior violent history, and his diagnosed conditions, including depression, anxiety, and autism. They asked Judge Arlie Smith to consider going below the minimum sentence, suggesting Pearson required specialized treatment rather than life in prison. Judge Smith listened carefully, acknowledging that Pearson was suffering from mental health issues and that his age and history were factors worth considering. But then the victims spoke, and their words painted a devastating picture of lasting impact. Madison addressed the court directly, describing the moment she realized she was paralyzed, a memory that would haunt her forever. She spoke about months of excruciating rehabilitation, the daily pain, the simple activities she could no longer do. She described receiving what she called her own life sentence from Pearson and pleaded with the judge to give Pearson the same life sentence he had given her. Jacqueline Royer spoke about the terror of watching her daughter being stabbed, the desperation of fighting to save her child, and the ongoing trauma. She described nightmares, hypervigilance, and how the attack fundamentally changed how she moved through the world. Kennedy Armstrong spoke about his decision to intervene, his injuries, and his anger at watching Pearson destroy a young woman's future over an inability to accept a breakup. Pearson himself took the stand to apologize, expressing what he claimed was sincere remorse. He acknowledged that June 3rd was the worst day in the victims' lives and said it was also the worst day of his. But Judge Smith made clear that remorse could not outweigh the severity of the crime and its lasting impact. The judge stated that certain crimes merit the maximum possible sentence, and this was one of them. He noted that without Armstrong's intervention and Jacqueline's protective actions, Pearson would have succeeded in killing Madison. The judge highlighted a particularly chilling detail. Madison had tried to help Pearson during his earlier suicide crisis, showing compassion for someone struggling. And that same person later violently attacked her. Judge R. Lee Smith sentenced Spencer Pearson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, Pearson's family cried out in despair while the Chemetz family shared hugs of relief. After 538 days of waiting, they finally had justice. Shortly after sentencing, Madison and Jacqueline filed a civil lawsuit seeking damages from Pearson, his parents, and Mr. Chubby's Wings restaurant. The lawsuit alleged that Pearson's parents knew their son had mental health issues and gave him the knife used in the attack despite his condition. It also alleged the restaurant failed to provide adequate security and did not call police when Madison and her mother expressed fear and urgency about Pearson's presence. The civil case put focus on how violence often results from multiple failures that compound into tragedy. Today, Madison Chemetz continues her recovery and advocacy. Physical therapy never truly ends. Maintaining her mobility requires ongoing effort that will continue for life. The psychological impact will likely never fully fade. There are still nightmares, still moments of fear, still days when the weight feels crushing, but there are also moments of joy, accomplishment, and hope. Madison's story has touched countless people who draw inspiration from her refusal to be defined by what was done to her. She has shown that survival is not the same as recovery, and recovery is not the same as thriving, but all three are possible even after devastating trauma. Madison has become an advocate for victims of domestic violence and stalking, using her platform to raise awareness about warning signs and the importance of taking threats seriously. She connected with the family of Tristan Bailey, another Florida victim of youth violence, working to push for better protective measures. She documents her journey on social media, sharing her story not for attention, but to inspire others facing their own battles. Her posts show the hard work of therapy, small victories, setbacks, and ultimately the fullness of a life being lived rather than merely endured. Spencer Pearson will spend the rest of his life in prison, his obsession having destroyed his own future as thoroughly as he tried to destroy Madison's. His case serves as a stark reminder of how dangerous inadequately treated mental health crisis can be. Kennedy Armstrong and Jacqueline Royer both received the Carnegie Medal, one of North America's highest honors for civilian heroism. The recognition acknowledged two people whose split-second decisions and selfless actions saved a life. Madison herself is perhaps the person least impressed by her own achievements, viewing her recovery as simply doing what she had to do. But to everyone who knows her story, Madison Chemetz represents something profoundly important. Proof that the human spirit can overcome even the most devastating attempts to break it. She walked when doctors said she never would. She smiled when she had every reason to despair. She chose hope when darkness seemed overwhelming. She transformed from victim to survivor to advocate, refusing to let Spencer Pearson's violence write the final chapter of her story. That is the true story of Madison Chemetz. Not defined by the violence inflicted upon her, but by the strength she found within herself to overcome it. Her journey reminds us that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond. And Madison Chemetz responded with extraordinary courage, remarkable determination, and inspiring grace. Spencer Pearson gave Madison a sentence of paralysis and trauma. But Madison gave the world something far more valuable. Proof that the human spirit can achieve what medical science says is impossible, and that violence does not have to have the final word. The events surrounding Madison Chemetz are a stark, brutal testament to the fragility of order and the insidious nature of unchecked individual pathology, a pathology that, when allowed to fester, can erupt into public violence, tearing apart not just lives, but the very fabric of communal trust. This case is not merely a personal tragedy. It is a clinical demonstration of how a society, in its modern guise, sometimes struggles to identify, contain, and ultimately deter a clear and present danger, even when warning signs are abundant and explicit. The narrative begins with a seemingly ordinary teenage breakup, a common occurrence in any era, yet it quickly devolves into a relentless campaign of stalking and harassment. This is where the first cracks in the societal defense become visible. Spencer Pearson's inability to accept rejection, his immediate turn to obsessive behavior, and his systematic violation of Madison's personal space and peace of mind are not merely symptoms of a broken heart, but rather indicators of a deeper, more dangerous psychological imbalance. In ancient Athens, such a persistent public harassment might have been addressed through community pressure or even formal legal action, though the specific mechanisms would differ. The concept of hubris, an overweening pride or insolence that leads to a disregard for others' rights and boundaries, was understood as a dangerous force, often leading to divine or human retribution. Pearson's actions initially were a form of psychological hubris, a belief that his will should override Madison's autonomy. The escalation from messages to physical presence, from mere annoyance to genuine fear, shows a progression that societies throughout history have struggled to manage. The modern state, with its emphasis on individual rights and due process, often finds itself in a reactive posture, waiting for a definitive act of violence before it can intervene decisively. This waiting period, this interval between clear threat and physical harm, is where the greatest vulnerability lies. Pearson's disturbing Snapchat post, simulating suicide, was a critical juncture. It was a cry for help, yes, but also a manipulative act, a psychological weapon designed to elicit a response. His family recognized a crisis and sought help, leading to a brief hospitalization. This intervention, while commendable in its intent, proved insufficient. The underlying obsession remained, even intensified. This points to a recurring historical dilemma: the limits of institutional intervention in matters of individual will and deep-seated psychological disturbance. Roman society, for example, had its own forms of family-based intervention and public shaming for individuals who deviated from accepted norms, but the capacity to truly cure or control profound mental illness was, as it remains, limited. The idea that a brief period of psychiatric care can fundamentally alter a deeply ingrained, obsessive pattern of thought and behavior is often a hopeful, rather than realistic, expectation. The release of Pearson, with his obsession undiminished, set the stage for the inevitable tragedy. The casual lunch, a symbol of normal life and innocent enjoyment, was invaded by the specter of past violence. Pearson's deliberate appearance at the restaurant, his watchful presence, was a calculated act of intimidation, a final psychological assault before the physical one. The surveillance recordings, cold and impartial, reveal the predator tracking his prey, the chilling precision of his intent. The immediate reaction of Madison and her mother to flee is a primal instinctual response to danger, a recognition that the social contract of safety in public spaces had been utterly breached. Their attempt to quietly escape, to avoid confrontation, speaks to a common human desire to avert conflict, a desire often exploited by those determined to inflict harm. The explosion of violence in the parking lot is the culmination of all these failures and pathologies. Pearson's attack, 17 stab wounds, targeting vital areas, was not random or impulsive. It was methodical, an attempt at execution. The fact that he used a knife given to him by his parents, engraved with his information, adds a layer of disturbing irony and highlights the unwitting role of even well-meaning family members in the unfolding tragedy. This is a pattern seen throughout history, from the feuds of medieval Europe to the gang violence of modern cities. The weapon, often an everyday object, becomes an extension of a twisted will. The heroism of Jacqueline Royer, Madison's mother, is a powerful counterpoint to Pearson's depravity. Her instinct to shield her daughter, to throw herself into the attack, is a timeless act of maternal self-sacrifice, echoing the legendary bravery of mothers, defending their young in countless historical narratives. Her wounds are a testament to her courage, a physical manifestation of her love. Equally vital was the intervention of Kennedy Armstrong, the restaurant manager. His sprint across the parking lot, his tackle, and his subsequent struggle to disarm Pearson are acts of pure, unadulterated heroism. He was a stranger, yet he chose to confront extreme danger, putting his own life at risk to save others. This is the essence of civic virtue, a quality celebrated in ancient republics like Rome, where citizens were expected to act for the common good, even at personal cost. Armstrong's actions stand in stark contrast to the passive horror of other witnesses, reminding us that in moments of crisis, the few brave souls who act can alter the course of destiny. Pearson's attempt to slit his own throat after being subdued is a final, desperate act of self-destruction, a grim coda to his violent outburst. It underscores the depth of his psychological turmoil, a self-loathing intertwined with his outward aggression. The aftermath of the attack reveals the catastrophic consequences: Madison's paralysis, her mother's injuries, Armstrong's nerve damage. These are the tangible costs of unchecked violence, the ripple effects that spread far beyond the immediate victims. The medical prognosis for Madison was dire, a life sentence of paralysis. Yet her refusal to accept this fate, her grueling, miraculous recovery, is a testament to the indomitable nature of the human spirit. This defiance in the face of overwhelming odds, this sheer force of will, is a theme that resonates across all civilizations. From the Stoic philosophers of Greece and Rome, who emphasized inner strength and resilience in the face of external adversity, to the narratives of survival in times of war and famine, humanity has always found inspiration in those who refuse to yield. Madison's walk across the graduation stage, against all medical expectations, is a modern epic of personal triumph, a powerful repudiation of the violence that sought to define her. The criminal justice system, in this case, eventually delivered a clear, decisive outcome: life in prison for Pearson. The judge's reasoning, highlighting the premeditation, the lasting impact, and the chilling betrayal of Madison's earlier compassion, underscores the societal imperative to punish such acts severely. The civil lawsuit, targeting Pearson's parents and the restaurant, raises crucial questions about responsibility and negligence, about the collective duty to prevent foreseeable harm. It forces a wider examination of the conditions that allow such violence to occur, from familial awareness of mental health crises to the security protocols of public establishments. This broader legal action reflects a societal attempt to assign accountability beyond the immediate perpetrator, a recognition that complex tragedies often stem from multiple points of failure. The story concludes with Madison as an advocate, transforming her trauma into a platform for change. This is the ultimate act of reclaiming agency, of turning personal suffering into a force for public good. Her work to raise awareness about domestic violence and stalking, her connection with other victims, and her documentation of her journey on social media all serve to strengthen the communal immune system against such pathologies. This act of advocacy, of speaking truth to power and warning others, is a vital component of a healthy society, a civic duty that transcends personal pain. The Carnegie Medal awarded to Jacqueline and Kennedy reaffirms society's recognition of their extraordinary courage, inscribing their names into the annals of heroism. In essence, the Madison Chimetz case encapsulates a profound struggle: the individual's battle against a malevolent force, the community's struggle to protect its members, and society's ongoing effort to balance individual liberties with collective safety, to understand the roots of violence, and to foster resilience in the face of its devastating consequences. It is a modern parable, reminding us that vigilance, courage, and a robust commitment to justice are eternal necessities in the perpetual human endeavor to build and maintain civilization against the ever-present threat of chaos and cruelty. The failures here, from the inability to adequately treat Pearson's deepening mental illness to the restaurant's alleged lack of security, are not unique to our time but reflect perennial challenges in managing the darker aspects of human nature. The heroism, however, is equally timeless, a beacon of hope in the face of despair. The case of Madison Chimetz lays bare a chilling truth about the health of our current system and civilization. We are often reactive rather than proactive, struggling to contain the escalating dangers of individual pathology until after catastrophic harm has been inflicted. This narrative reveals a society grappling with the complex interplay of mental health crises, personal responsibility, and institutional accountability, often failing at critical junctures. The initial warning signs from Spencer Pearson, his obsessive behavior, his harassment, and his disturbing social media posts were all clear indicators of a mind spiraling into dangerous territory. Yet, despite family intervention and a brief hospitalization, the system failed to adequately address the root cause of his escalating fixation. This highlights a critical vulnerability. Our current mental health infrastructure, fragmented and often under-resourced, frequently lacks the capacity for sustained, effective intervention in cases of severe personality disorders or obsessive compulsions, especially when individuals are resistant to treatment or when legal frameworks limit involuntary long-term care. The consequence is that individuals like Pearson are released back into society, still harboring dangerous intentions, becoming ticking time bombs. The short-term consequence of such systemic gaps is the eruption of predictable yet preventable violence as seen in the brutal attack on Madison. The long-term consequence is a corrosive erosion of social trust. When citizens cannot rely on institutions, whether family, mental health services, or even public establishments, to identify and mitigate obvious threats, a pervasive sense of unease takes root. People become more guarded, less trusting, and the communal bonds that underpin a healthy society begin to fray. Deterrence is severely undermined when the path to violence is so clearly signposted, yet the perpetrator is allowed to proceed. The fact that Madison had previously shown compassion to Pearson during his crisis, only to be violently attacked by him, is a profound betrayal that speaks to a deeper societal sickness: the weaponization of vulnerability and the perversion of empathy. This incident demonstrates that even when individuals act with extraordinary courage, like Jacqueline Roer and Kennedy Armstrong, their heroism is often a response to a failure of prevention. Their actions, while laudable, should not be necessary to avert such a tragedy. The civil lawsuit, though a post facto measure, points to the need for greater accountability across the board, from parents who provide weapons to troubled children, to businesses that fail to provide adequate security in the face of known threats. If patterns do not change, if we continue to treat mental health crises with insufficient resources and reactive measures, we will see more such acts of senseless violence. The erosion of trust will deepen, leading to a more fearful and atomized society. The lesson from Madison Chimetz is clear and prophetic. A civilization's strength is measured not just by its ability to punish evil, but by its capacity to prevent it, to listen to the whispers of danger before they become screams, and to protect the innocent with a vigilance that matches the malevolence of those who seek to destroy. Madison's miraculous recovery and her subsequent advocacy are a testament to the enduring human spirit, a beacon of hope in a darkening landscape. But her story also serves as a stark warning that such triumphs should not be born out of such profound and preventable suffering.